Greetings. My name is Michael David Morris Jr. This is a video will, a last will and testament. It is a video analysis breakdown of my life. I want to make this as informal and formal as I possibly can. I want it to be me. I want it to be, I want it to reek of my personality, my bravado, my character, so that I can precisely and accurately articulate my experience here and any wisdom and understandings and comprehension with regard to the environments that we find ourselves in and how to operate within them. So I was born Michael David Morris Jr., son of Michael David Morris Sr. and Sonia Renita Cornell. I was born in East Los Angeles at White Memorial Hospital on October 19th, 1983. For my first experience that I can remember, I was 12 days prior to being born. So I was minus 12 days in the womb. And I had a very specific thought. And this thought was spoken in English because that's the language I had heard in the womb. And the thought that I had was, I have to remember to continue to exist. Otherwise, I won't. That's the first thing I remember thinking ever. I blacked out for presumably more than 12 days. And when I came to, I was floating over my mother and father in a blue waiting room where these brown seats went around a pillar, a rather thick pillar, and the thing was cylindrical and could hold probably about 8 people comfortably, probably 10 to 12, not comfortably. But I'm just above my parents and they're crying and I'm looking at them and I didn't understand why they looked so sad and worried. And I just was like, okay. So fast forward some years, I found out that my lungs had collapsed. I have a scar here and I have a scar here from them having to essentially cut my side open to rehabilitate my lungs. And presumably I had my body, my spirit, my soul had left my body. And I was witnessing my parents basically worried about me in the waiting room. Fast forward several years, obviously. And from what my mom told me, I was very talkative around the age of 9 months, having full sentences. What is that? Where are we? What are we doing? At the age of 9 months. And anybody who knows me knows that that's probably true. They think I like to talk. People will say I like to talk. I don't like to talk. I literally know shit that other people refuse to understand or comprehend or learn. So I'm obligated to tell motherfuckers. Now, do I enjoy conversation with people who are worthy of conversation? Obviously. But just this idea that Michael loves to talk, like to hear myself talk. And most people don't have that opinion of me, that I talk to hear myself talk. They know I'm disseminating information, but they still think I enjoy it. My own wife thinks that I enjoy that shit. I don't. I don't like telling people shit that they should already know. I like discussing and conversing about things that I may not know about or that I have an interest in. So fast forward in my life, I was raised for a short while in Watts, and we lived in, I forgot what it was called, but it was Watts for about 3 or 4 years before moving to Catskill in Carson, California, where I had a very close relationship with a lot of my cousins because my mom has like 9 brothers and sisters. At the time had 12 and then ended up being reduced down to 9. My dad had a significant number of brothers and sisters, but in Carson, California, it was predominantly my mom's family, and I had dozens of cousins at any given time running around a specific apartment complex called the Catskill Apartments in Carson. And we played a lot of games. We ding dong ditch. We played hide and go seek. We played tag, and we had a lot of fun. We had a lot of community engagement, barbecues, cookouts all day, every day. The music was good. The music was positive when in 1985, 86. And it was very encouraging growing up that way. I remember one specific time, though, even though I didn't know what drugs were necessarily and didn't have an understanding of cannabis and weed, despite my mom being an avid smoker my entire life, and me just having not been aware of that. I do remember a specific funny story, a time when I was maybe about five and a half, and my cousin Lance and I had gotten his mom and my mom smoked. So you see what you see. And Lance got a hold of some loose leaf paper and a match, a book of matches, and was determined for us to smoke some weed at the age of 5 years old. So we went out and Lance grabbed some big, stalky, like dandelion, like weeds out of the ground and starts breaking them up. Then he rolls it up into this loose leaf like a burrito, not a joint, a burrito, and goes to light it. And here we are inside one of those old school at a playground. It looks like cheese. It's got a couple holes in it. Just looks like a thing of cheese, and you can climb in and stuff. We're in there hiding from the rest of the world, trying to smoke weeds. And so that was a type of shenanigan I was getting into before even the age of 6 years old. And because of economic reasons, at the time, my father, Michael Morris Sr., and I will repeat the name so that they're understood. At the time, my father was working at LAX in Los Angeles, the airport. He would get home really late, and I would wake up, same way E.M. Ashton does. I would wake up, and I would go see my dad, and I would yell at him, and hey, and let's hang out and try to wake back up. And he would kind of nurture me back to sleep. But I was always excited to see my father. And as I I had a cat named Reenie and a cat named Cotton. Reenie was first. I was like 3 when I had that cat. And for whatever reason, I think Reenie died. But then when it was time to move, because of economic reasons, because of job losses and job transitions, my mom was a phlebotomist and a registered nurse, if I'm not mistaken. Like, she was a nurse, but I'm not sure if she was an RN or a nurse assistant. But she, before my brother being born. But we had to move for economic reasons, and I had to leave Cotton behind. And I was fucking pissed. And I kind of had an aversion towards pets then moving forward. And I kind of had the idea that pets were a lot like slaves, even at that young age. But I wasn't, I still was a victim of my environment and had very few I didn't have the ability to necessarily refute the nature of the environment that I was reared in. Most people had pets, so I found it to be very normal. So we had to move to Las Vegas from LA, and we left Los Angeles. We arrived in Las Vegas with very few resources, except for the fact that my grandfather, my mom's dad, Mr. Lindbergh Cornell, owned a motel, on the Las Vegas downtown strip called the Uptown Motel. The Uptown Motel stood for several decades, and my grandfather owned it and operated it. And he allowed my mother and father and myself to live in one of the rooms when we first got out there for probably about 8 or 9 months. And the reason why it was so long is because we were able to stack a significant amount of money for us to move forward in our new home of Las Vegas, Nevada. And we would go to this hotel called the El Cortez, which was right across the street. And the El Cortez I think it's still there to this day, but the Uptown Motel was literally right across the street. The Uptown Motel was a motel in Las Vegas. It wasn't the best accommodations. It was what a old black man could afford in Las Vegas. It's really an accomplishment to own any kind of hotel or motel in Las Vegas, especially during this time, because he obtained ownership of it in like the 70s or something. And literally, this man did not graduate past sixth grade. He had a sixth grade education and below, and was able to become a millionaire and own this hotel. So um, we lived in this hotel for years, or excuse me, for not for years, thank you, for months, and we would eat predominantly at the because the motel did not have the best it didn't have a fully functioning oven. It wasn't an apartment; it was a motel. So we actually ate at the El Cortez an awful lot. And the El Cortez has a very distinct smell. And I was actually talking to one of my customers about this the other day because they smelled like it. I said, "You smell like the El Cortez." She said, "Cigarettes and Kino." And I was like, "Yes, cigarettes and Kino." That's the El Cortez. So as a young 6.5-year-old boy, I'd be at the El Cortez eating some medium quality food, but the eggs at the El Cortez, like Denny's, always had one strand of hair in the eggs. Always, without fail, every single time. To the point where I expected it and couldn't see getting eggs from anywhere without having hair in it. It was because of the El Cortez. But I would be sitting at the table because this was a hotel. It did not have um, like a placemat for the kids with little pictures and stuff on it, like at a fast food restaurant maybe, or at an IHOP. It had Keno. It had bingo and Keno, and the Keno was constant. The bingo was like whatever, but the Keno was constant. If you know, you know. You got a little card with a bunch of numbers on them, and you would just go through and you would scratch out what numbers you thought would be picked. And there's a digital placement all over the casino at the El Cortez of the numbers that were drawn. The numbers were drawn like every hour. And I'd just be sitting there picking numbers. I'd pick like 10 or something like that. And I'd hand it to my parents, and they would play the numbers. It's literally me gambling. They would play the numbers. I'm not sure if we won anything ever. I don't recall us ever winning, and I don't recall me ever being praised for having chosen the right numbers. But that was the experience. And I would engage in this environment. I would run through the casinos, and that familiar smell of cigars and cigarettes and really, really quality air conditioning, trying to organize and manage all of the breaths and the indoor smoking that was done in the 80s in these hotels and casinos. There's a very distinct smell. I can smell it now in my head with regard to the El Cortez and the downtown hotels. We used to go to the Plaza. We used to go to the Horseshoe. In many of these places, I think the owner of the Horseshoe, Ted Binion, I think that was his name, he used to get arrested a lot. Though he was a millionaire, he used to get arrested a lot and came from like old school money, like old West money type shit. And he went to jail so much that every time he got out, he'd be hungry as shit and there'd be nowhere to go because he looks all bummy, having just gotten out of jail. When he owned the Horseshoe, if you got out of jail and you had your release papers, you were able to get a dinner like a steak dinner, or a breakfast for free. And it was very cheap back then anyway, but that was still just the lick coming out of jail. I imagine I hadn't gone yet because I was very young. But I lived in and dwelled in that very small area of downtown Las Vegas, the El Cortez. I wasn't in school yet because I was so young. And the motel. Fun fact, my grandfather, Lindbergh, actually discovered a dead body in one of his rooms in one of his bathtubs with his organs removed, his liver specifically. I'm not sure if it was any other, but his liver was gone. And from then on, my grandfather carried that that clickety clack. And I'm pretty sure he had a click clack before then, but I know that he specifically started carrying it then. And I'm prefacing all that to say that was my life before a very specific event. But right before that very specific event that would reshape and shape my entire life, I did start school, first grade, kindergarten. And I loved kindergarten. It was a little less organized than I'd like and a little too tyrannical or authoritarian for my liking. But I gravitated towards the disabled kids. I recognized very young that they were authentic. That most people, they looked like they were playing a character. And the people who were differently able, they didn't play a different character. They were definitely not pretending to be who they were. And each person that I met with a differing ability was unique, despite or in spite of their condition, and not in spite of necessarily, but their condition did not weigh on the fact that that they had kept and were engaging in authentic living in their identity. And I gravitated towards that and would sit at the table with the differently able people, kids, and engage in really cool conversations and just really genuine, heartfelt dialogue about life, and what was ever popular in the media or on cartoons and stuff. And then, of course, my brother Devonte Alexander Morris was born. And prior, he was born August 29th, 1990. But prior to that, my parents had told me that mom was pregnant and now I'm going to have a baby brother and we're going to be able to play baseball together and we're going to be able to play football and run around and throw the ball and do all the great things that brothers can do with each other, especially of comparable age. And you fast forward to August 29th, 1990, my brother is born, and the complications were not apparent at first. The complications were apparent at first, but not the disability or the effects of the complications. Fast forward like 6 months, and I find out that my brother is severely disabled. I'm told he will never play baseball. I'm told he will never play football. He will never run around the way that I thought that we were going to be able to. And I was existentially disappointed. A disappointment that I recognized then would shape the rest of my life. And I didn't know anything about it. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know, there was nothing to be done. So I lived my life attempting to be and engage in the normal behaviors of a kid still my age. And then one very specific thing happened. I want you to hear me and understand this very specific. I was an only child, and I assumed that I would be an only child, not forever, but that my parents' love and attention was secured upon to me. And once my brother was born, and we're gonna pause so I can go check on the kids. Okay. So I don't know necessarily where I was, but I know that my brother was born. Oh, I know exactly where I was. I was under the impression I would always have my parents' full attention whenever I wanted. And when that wasn't the case anymore because of doctor's visits, a myriad of doctor's visits and diagnosis and time spent dealing with my brother and his condition and discovering what that would really mean for our family, I became jealous of the attention my brother received because I didn't understand it. And to my shame, I guess I had seen some movie where somebody put a pillow over somebody else's face to eliminate them from this planet. And I emulated that behavior on my brother. I put a pillow over his face for about 4 seconds before realizing that the sound I was hearing was unlike the one I saw in the movie, and that it was a unique sound that sounded oddly familiar. And I removed the pillow, and my brother Devonte was laughing at me. And it's not that he didn't understand what I was doing, because he did. He was laughing at me about it. Like, bro, you're so weak that you're gonna try to kill me. This is what he's looking. He's looking at me like this, like, you're so weak that you're going to try to eliminate me from the planet because you don't feel like you's getting used attention. You don't feel like you're getting enough attention. You really need you's parents so bad that you's. That's what happened. He literally laughed at me, and I felt so ashamed. I felt so embarrassed to myself and in front of and before him that I would attempt to remove him from the earth because he required a little bit of extra attention. And I recognized that the behavior I was engaging in, and all of the behaviors up until that point that led me to feel that way, had caused me to become a full-on piece of shit. And that if I were to continue with any of those behaviors, I would live my entire life as some version of a recovering piece of shit. And I didn't want that. And I didn't want to be that. And I looked at my brother and his courage and his bravery, and I wanted to be that. I wanted to be as brave as he was, to be not able to defend himself, and to sit there in my face and laugh at me with balls as big as the earth, just laugh at me. I wanted to have that courage. I wanted to have that focus. I wanted to have that awareness. I wanted to know what he knew that he could just see right through me and literally obliterate my ego, my false ego, completely decimated my false ego. Doesn't mean I don't have an ego, no. It just means I know how to use it now, because that wasn't it. And he showed me that. And that interaction, that is when my brother and my relationship our relationship wasn't born August 29th. It was born that day when I tried to fucking kill this man, this baby. And he literally laughed at me about it. Then corrected my behavior. And so from then on, my brother was my teacher. He was my guide. He was my confidant. He was my brother. He was my best friend. And we spent, because time for little kids, especially that little, is not really a thing. Time's not really a thing anyway. But for us then, it was like the movie Inception. We spent decades doing one specific thing. We spent centuries doing one or two specific things. We spent millennia engaging in and learning the mechanics of life, the mechanics of living, the mechanics of being alive, staying alive, the mechanics of how environments function. And for the first few years, when my brother would attempt to reach for something, his hand would go the other way. So I'm reaching for my phone right now. This is how my the beginning of his struggle went for him. I want my phone in my hand, but I'm reaching the opposite direction. So he had to rewire his mind and his brain in order to finally get his hand to go the direction that he wanted it to go in. And once he did that, he began to extrapolate and expand and expound on his own training. And my brother's training was not the type of training you do to rehabilitate after, give me 1 second, baby, after some kind of trauma, or the kind of training someone does to go into battle. It was more like the training that one does in a state of martial arts. He had to train his mind, brain, and body how to work together, because they did not. And he did this successfully. One moment, please. This is going to be rough because I'm literally just trying to set my camera up however I can. But so I learned that I had a lot to learn in trying to kill my own brother. And moving forward, I was very meticulous about how I treated him, how I honored him, and what he was and what he was doing here on this planet. And so I took study, and I was describing how he would reach for things, but his hand would go the other way. It took him till he was, I think, 2.5 to start crawling and moving in the direction that he wanted to. When he would crawl, he would actually crawl the opposite direction. His motor functions were completely reversed, and he would almost perfectly do the opposite thing of what he was trying to do, what his intention was. And so he had to rewire his own brain from the mental state, probably from a spiritual state first, to be able to have the capacity to mentally do it, so that he could affect his physical body. Because without that process, he wasn't able to. He had to. It just wasn't, by default, in the physiology of his body, didn't work the way it was supposed to. And through minute little research, when I say minute little research, I'm talking about watching Dateline and like other broadcasts about his condition and other people's conditions, that made me aware that he had the capacity that any other human being had. It was that the wiring of his brain was unique and different, and this was objectively affecting him. It wasn't a subjective concept that he could just ignore. And so I studied my brother, and I studied him for hundreds, hundreds of years, a few thousand years. I know that sounds stupid to some people, but with time being relative and us being little ass kids, it was definitely, we had nothing else to do. Neither one of us was even in school yet. So all day, when he's playing with toys, when I'm playing with toys, how we play with toys, what are toys, what do they represent? We got the TV on, we're looking at the TV, we're analyzing how the police and cars and engineering and structures work, and we are applying them to our games and learning and doing simulations, and we are running simulations with regard to our environment and how we have to operate in it from his perspective, from my perspective, from our perspective, from a human perspective, objectively outside of our own natures or our own existence, our own identities, our own placement in this three-dimensional world. One moment. And so, yeah, I'm at the local library. This is where I will probably try to do this because I do have a good flow here. I try to do it at night when I'm coming home from work, but, while I set it up hands-free while I'm driving, but it's dark and I would have to have the light on and it's just a little much. And I want you to see that I'm putting this together with the effort that it deserves and the due diligence that it deserves. I will probably engage in here or there type recording while I'm driving in the car or whatnot, but when it comes to this specific block of information, my life and how it began and predominantly proceeded, I wanted to have light and I wanted to be structured for you. And I appreciate your time and engaging and caring about my life and how you got here, essentially. Or if you're just here to hang out with me and hear my voice, this is what this is for, because it's important, not just because I think I'm important or the information that I have is important, but just as a father, as a family member, as a regular ass human being on this planet. If you miss me, if you want to hear my voice, you have that. You have the ability to come here, download, so long as the internet's still running. Hopefully the world hasn't gotten so bad that we've gone back into the Stone Ages. Not we've gone back, but ended up in the Stone Ages with the cave people, and still have some modicum of internet. So my brother, I learned from my brother all these things. And I also noticed that, like the disabled or differently able people that I had engaged with before he was even born, he was very authentic to his identity, meaning he didn't believe in any of the constructs that everybody did. He didn't necessarily believe he was a boy or that he wasn't a girl. He didn't believe that he was black. He didn't believe that he was subordinate to anyone. Even though he depended completely on the efforts of other people, he knew that those people did not have an inherent authority over him, some inherent ability to revoke his consent, which is what authority really, really is. And that is alluded and spoken about more in this space of the Michael David Morris Jr. will, and my work in general. But that's one of the main and most important things that he showed me, is that you don't have, whatever system you find yourself in an environment, you don't have to identify with the system. Even nature's system does not force you to identify with it for it to work. So capitalism, communism, socialism, free market, democracy, this, that, and the other, constitutional republics, all these different things do not require you to attach your identity, who you think you are, or who you know you are, or who you see yourself as, to those systems, infrastructures, and institutions. It's not a prerequisite, and yet nearly everybody does it. Even the systems, usually drenched in tyranny, do not force you to believe in them. There are some exceptions, like Kim Jong-un, like forcing people kind of to believe. But outside of that, most people are not forced at threat of to believe in the system. They're forced at threat of to pay taxes, to pay tithings, to give up property, to give up homage, to pay homage. But they're never actually forced to believe that that shit is legitimate. They do that shit all on their own. And that's the main thing that my brother saved me from, is attaching my personal identity to the United States, to Africa, to any made up construct of a place on this fucking planet in order to operate myself as a being on this planet. And while I was able to compare and contrast that to everybody who does. So I rapidly became aware that most people in society are just doing whatever other people in society are doing, even beyond the prerequisites for them to be successful in the system. Like they actually are like overdoing it for no apparent reason, which is just another, what I would learn later as another symptom of the psychosis of the system. So I engaged in deep study with regard to human psychology and motivations, and not necessarily law at these ages. I was still very young, but then around the ages of 7, like still very young when my brother was still just a baby, we were going to one of his doctor's appointments, and I had saved up 700 pennies, and that's $7. And I had $7 whole dollars, 700 pennies, and I was so glad and proud of myself for saving it all up. And then I saw a man on the side of the street, and I'm already starting to read and stuff. And I literally was like, why does it say that he's hungry? Like, doesn't that say that he's hungry? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, why is he hungry? There's food every fucking where. And they were like, because he doesn't have enough money. Just remember how you just saved up 700 pennies? You need them 700 pennies to get something. He needs money to get the things he needs too. And I was like, but it's everywhere. I thought we were just doing money like if you want extra shit. Like I thought food and housing and clothes and all that shit and cars and transportation was covered by virtue of the success that we had achieved as a species and the freedom that we had achieved in the United States. I thought that was already covered. And like, if you wanted like a painting that nobody had, or you wanted some new piece of technology that was limited in its amount of resources, that there was this currency called money that you could engage in for the luxuries. I didn't know money was for the necessities. When I found out that money was for the necessities too, and that this person was holding a sign that says hungry will work for food, or wash your windows for food or some shit like that, I lost my mind. I gave that man all 700 of my pennies. I know it was probably like an issue, but he took them. And I lost my fucking mind. I was pissed off. I was like, wait a minute. And so I'm not going to go into that because there's other videos for that and there's other time for that. But it did piss me off on an existential level. Like I actually was like pretty fucking pissed off about that. And not too long after that, my father said that we were going to go fishing. And I was like, yes, I had never been fishing yet. And I was like super ecstatic about going fishing. And he's like, but we got to go get a fishing license. And I was like, what? What the fuck is that? And he was like, it's permission from the government to fish. And I was like, blown away. I was like, Robin Hood didn't need a fishing license to fish. Like, wasn't that the whole point of Robin Hood? Like not needing the king's permission to live and survive? Like fishing is intrinsic. I'm hearing about Bibles and religions and all this stuff. And I'm thinking to myself, how can we be free and how can we have peace if we need permission to engage in something that every living being on the planet knows they can engage in without permission, which is acquisition of their fucking food? I was pissed. So my brother being disabled was not the same type of pissed, of existential anger. It was like an existential disappointment. It wasn't like pissed, it was a disappointment. But what I knew after I tried to snuff him, what I knew that I would learn from him dramatically dwarfed what I wouldn't be able to do with him or what I would have to do for him. And I recognized that very young, not nearly as specifically as I do now. But the finding out about homelessness and finding out that I needed permission to go fishing fucking did it. I have been since then ferociously pissed off about that and have built an understanding of the world based on their very basic principles. But fast forward, I begin school. I'm in first and second. I went to a school called Robert E. Lake. Yes, Robert E. Lake elementary school, and I was a very independent kid. Like there was one specific time in a story I like to tell about my life where the teacher told me that I had to ask permission to go to the restroom. Like I had to raise my hand. And I was like, the fuck is that? I've lived my whole life and never had to raise my hand to go to the bathroom. And I was informed that it disrupts and all that. And there was a bunch of excuses. Tyranny had a lot of excuses. Authoritarianism had a lot of reasons for the authoritarianism. And it was always about what other people did. Other people abuse going to the bathroom and they don't raise their hand and it's disruptive and they're doing it on purpose and they're not really. I'm like, I'm not them. And I refuse to be judged based on what they did and have done or are doing. So I'm going to go to the restroom when my body tells me to, not when you say I can or can't. And if you have a problem with that, talk to my parents about it. And I hadn't informed my parents that I told them this. I'm just telling them I'm going to go to the bathroom when I want. And my parents will deal with you because you seem like the middleman between me and them. Or they seem like the middleman between you and me. And so I informed them that I will be going to the bathroom whenever I want. And my parents did the same. And there was another incident, a very specific incident, where the teacher told me I had to walk in a straight line with the other kids to the auditorium for an assembly. And I had just found out about lice like the day before. And I didn't know that lice didn't like this beautiful melanated skin and hair. So I was like worried that I was going to get infected with lice. And they were trying to get me nose to neck. No, I call it nose to nape. People be laughing about that shit because I'm like nose to nape. They wanted my nose at the nape of the back of their neck. I know this because I could feel my breath banking off of their neck back onto my lips. And I stepped out of line. And I said to the teacher, I'm not walking in that line. This is a quote, verbatim quote. I will get where we're going when we get there, and I won't do anything I'm not supposed to do along the way, but I am not getting back in that line. And I didn't. And she gave up, and I did cartwheels, and I checked out dandelions and ladybugs, and crawled and rolled all the way to the auditorium. And as soon as the first person got to the door, I ran to the back of the line and walked in with everybody else and sat down without incident. But it was the first time that I knew that I was willing to step out of line and fucking stay there. And so fast forward in that space, Robert E. Lake was cool. I had a kid that would call my brother retarded daily. His name was Justin. I can't remember his last name, but he was, from what I understand now and what I'm aware of now, that man was disabled. That young person was disabled and was projecting. But I got RPC'd, required parent conference, over 40 times in one school year, because I beat his ass every time he said that about my brother. And one specific time, this fool called my brother retarded. And I chased him down, and there was a kid named Edwin and a couple other kids that I knew in the neighborhood. And we weren't friends by any stretch of the imagination, but they valued my brother. They valued my relationship with my brother, and which is a going theme throughout our lives. But I would chase after this fool, and usually I caught him with ease and beat his ass. But this time he hit a left, and that left was so clean that I tried to make that left, and I slid under a gate. Like my leg got caught under one of those school fences, and it wasn't one of the ones where it's lifted up already. It was all the way down tight, and my foot just whoosh, was in there. I was stuck. All I saw was Edwin and 3 other kids hit that corner, and he only got like 3 more steps past me where I am. And then you see Edwin take off his belt. Edwin can't be nothing but 8 and a half years old. Edwin takes off his belt. It's like a little Vietnamese kid. Takes off his belt and takes the buckle side and goes to Justin, goes to town. Whap, 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 whap. I think he said, and the other kids are just working him from the side. And this kid, Edwin said, don't ever talk about his brother like that. And it's just working him. And I'm just like, c'est magnifique. And then I actually got myself clear, walked over and served him about 3 or 4 times to the under to the chin, and let him know, bro, like I will try to remove you from this planet if you talk about my brother like that. And Justin was unfazed. That's how I know this boy had real issues. He was really protecting because he was undeterred. Next day he was back at it again. Fast forward, live my life. One specific thing that my parents were very proud of was that for show and tell one day, I brought my brother. I brought my brother for show and tell. And I stood in front of the class and I said, "This is my brother Devonte. He has, and I know there's doxing now, but my brother has passed, and this is my videography." I informed him that he had been diagnosed with cerebral palsy, epilepsy, and microcephalus, which come with their own descriptions. And if you're interested, I recommend that you look them up. But I told them that I was bringing my brother in for show and tell because when my mom and my dad and him would pick me up from school and other times that they've seen me in a neighborhood, some of the kids would stare. And I told him that I don't want y'all staring at him because you don't understand him or that you're afraid of him or that you think he's weird or gross. I want you to be staring if you're going to stare because you see what I see, which is magnificence, beauty, art in fucking motion. And so I explained to them our relationship. I explained to these little 7 and 8 year old kids uh, what being disabled meant and what it meant for somebody's family. And my teacher was very impressed. And then fast forward, my brother starts having grand mal seizures. He starts losing abilities that he had worked diligently to gain, and we end up in the hospital. And I'm going to make a key point of a couple of situations or a couple of instances where my parents were very proud and where I ultimately would be existentially proud of myself, in that I would leave school and go to the hospital. I wouldn't go home. Sometimes I went from school to the hospital, take a bird bath in the sink at the hospital, and go back to school the next day, only to get home maybe a couple days later. But I engaged with the kids, not just my brother, but all of the kids, the environment of the hospital, the children's ward specifically, when he was there. And I met kids in life-threatening situations. I met kids with leukemia. I didn't just meet them. I hung out with them. I spoke with them. We made games together. We played games together. We built little structures out of the blocks and anything you might find at a public library or in a hospital waiting room or a children's room. And I learned very fast that these people were living a different life, even than the lives that my brother and I were living. And one instance of me being super, I guess, amiable or human is that I was running around this hospital for months while my brother was in there consistently for weeks and months at a time. And I would be in my regular clothes with a little gown or something over that. And the kids all knew that I wasn't one of them, that I wasn't sick, that I wasn't living in that hospital, that I was only visiting. And I didn't want that to come between us. I didn't want that to be a part of what would be something that they're thinking about while we're playing, while they're trying to escape, mentally at least, their circumstances. So I asked the staff if they could get me a full patient get up, a full patient wardrobe, so that I can blend in with these kids so they wouldn't be seeing my street clothes, knowing that I get to go home at the end of playtime, even though that was the truth. And it did alleviate that divide. I wasn't necessarily them, but I definitely wasn't an outcast. Or an outsider. I was someone who was sick, and that it didn't matter what time, how long I was going to be in the hospital. It might be my last day, but while we were playing, we are equal. We are on the same footing, and there's no harboring of jealousy for me being able to go home or resentment for me not being the one that's sick. And that was one of the first times that I really became aware that I was capable of deep empathy. And so time went on. My brother was in and out of the hospital, and I went on that routine of school, hospital, home, or school, hospital, school, home for quite a while. Pretty much all throughout elementary, junior high school. My brother kind of leveled out when I was in high school for a while. And then there was some after that. But for the most part, it was a lot of hospital visits, a lot of doctor's office visits, a lot of diagnosis, and a lot of interaction with individuals who had to value every specific moment of life. We went to the Special Children's Center of Las Vegas. If there's any internet information, I might throw that up about the Special Children's Center. My mother, Sonia Renita Cornell, and my father, Michael David Morris Sr., were voted to be president. My dad was president, and my mom was vice president of the Special Children's Center Parents Coalition. So the parents and how they relate to the Special Children's Center events, facilitation of infrastructure, and the mechanisms of providing assistance and support to differently abled people and their differently able children and their families. And I was able to sit in meetings in a room not unlike this one, with a much bigger chair and much bigger room, but with a table and chairs. And I would hear my parents sit around with a bunch of other parents who have differently able children discuss how they exist and how they operate with regard to their children in the world and the society and the systems that they live in and the institutions that they work with and deal with, and how that relates to how they live, how they move forward, and what they could do to implement strategies and plans to make all of that more efficient. So that was really my very first taste of like grassroots organizing, grassroots activism, and this understanding of the nature of human beings and their purpose here. And it wasn't that being the vice president and president of the Special Children was part of their purpose, but in enabling equity and working towards making the world better than you found it. And that's still not one's purpose, but it definitely alluded to these things. And then it afforded me the ability to actually engage in assisting in resource support. I was able to go to events and be the little kid, take your tickets and tell you which way to go for events regarding the Special Children's Center. As Devontae grew up and as we grew up, we were gifted with the ability to go see Lance Burton, which was a magician. Time and time again, he was always performing for the Shriners of Las Vegas. And we were able to go to, like, my father at this time, he started off at the Nifty Nickel, but my brother's medical bills had rapidly grown so expensive, the Nifty Nickel had to let him go because of that. And one of the only companies that could support my brother's medical expenses was like the MGM Grand Casino. And my dad started working at the MGM Grand. And so I was able to get tickets to like Michael Crawford, which was another kind of magician. And I was able to see EFX, which was a huge production show on the Strip. I was able to watch that show about a half a dozen times. And we lived a very privileged life when it comes to the many entertainments, the many proclivities that Las Vegas has. We were gifted to be able to engage in these things either free or for very cheap, to the point where my brother and I we would give free tickets to go to Disney on Ice, and without fail, every single time we would be placed on the ice. Like, they had a special section for differently able people in wheelchairs, but that section was always packed. And we got there ahead of time, and sometimes we got there late, but either way, we were always taken into this elevator at UNLV, which I would later work for, what is it called? The Thomas and Mack Center. And we would be on the ice, to the point where one specific time, Princess Jasmine skated up to me and my brother and stopped and shot ice in my brother and my face, and us, we're just like, this was the coolest thing ever. Like, that's Princess Jasmine. Aladdin had just came out, and like, there's ice on her face. I mean, it was to the point where I had to hold my brother's wheelchair, because not only is he rocking it from the amount of excitement that he has, but we're literally on the ice. So my little foldy chair and his wheelchair are sliding backwards and sides forward, because the area that we're on, it's off the ice, but the cold that they have to keep it is so cold that the ice is creeping back onto the actual asphalt or the concrete. And so we're sliding around. We got to watch these shows from very close. We wherever we've gone and whatever we've done, we've been treated with the most delicacy and the utmost respect. And that has been so wonderful. It has kept me having a lot of hope in humanity and a lot of joy and love with regard to what humans are capable of. Yes, baby.
So do you know that how do I draw an Algeria flag? Look, go to Chrome to see the video.
Chrome? You want me to go to Chrome so you can show me the Algerian flag? Give me 1 second, y'all.
So I can remember.
You're drawing flags so you can remember?
I do not have my phone, so I gotta remember with my brain.
Okay. Get off the table for me because I'm. Oh, here it is, Wi-Fi. Let's turn this off. I didn't even. Where's my paper? You want the Algerian flag, huh?
Yeah.
Algerian flag.
Whoa.
Later. That's the kitties, and that's y'all probably. Ian, I wanted to see the I forgot I could do. Ooh, that's cool. The Algerian flag. Yeah, he's very obsessed with his time. So I learned very quickly that these systems were, or this world was very different and operated very different than it perceived to. So also, I was going to, this whole time that I'm, living, I'm going to fast food restaurants, McDonald's, they got play places, and I'm just aware that this ain't food. I'm aware that aside from, and also with regards to my brother, I became aware that there were treatments and cures being worked on for various types of illnesses, diseases, and differing abilities that were not being explored, that were being suppressed. If they were being explored, the results were being suppressed. The results were being extinguished. They were being perverted and distorted. And I was realizing that people had a vested interest in not curing anything, which is what I knew that science was for from a medical perspective, for cures, treatments, but cures, and was capable of these cures. And it wasn't happening. And so I knew that my brother wasn't getting the best quality of life that society could provide. Even though he was getting the best quality of life from his family, our ability to give him a higher quality was stifled by money, by these arbitrary rules, these pieces of legislation. I noticed this concept of permits, which was I would learn later, is an abbreviation for permission, and that free adults were endlessly berated and manipulated and coerced into obeying and subjecting themselves or being subjected to violence, threats, duress, a perpetual state of duress. And I didn't have words and terms for all this when I was a kid, granted, but I did have a very good understanding of it all. And I watched a good deal of movies. One of the first movies that I latched onto before my brother was even born was The 10 Commandments by Cecil B. DeMaye. And though I've never been a Christian, never been someone who has had a religion at all ever, that movie, the first thing that movie says in the beginning, the director comes out, and it never happens. The director comes out on stage from behind the curtains, and this is not even a stage show. He comes from behind the curtains, and he says, "This movie is about the question that still blazes today: Are men free under God, or are they subjects and property of the state?" Like, okay, damn! Right out the gate, the 10 Commandments, Cecil B. DeMaye. Are men and women free under God, nature, whatever you want to call it? Are we free, or are we subjects of the state? Are we free, or are we somehow morbidly and existentially obligated to state? Look at this little guy. Right here. And I recognized that authority, I didn't know it at the time, what I call authority vested in strangers now. I didn't know authority was what it is, which if you don't know what it is, then you have other work to do outside of this video. But all through Michael David Morris Jr. YouTube, you will find the answer to what that is and what any questions about that. But I saw that the quality of life that my brother was able to achieve at 100% from his family level was still maybe 30% of a social level. I knew that we were being manipulated to take scraps, to accept crumbs with regards to technology, with regards to cures, with regards to treatments. And I knew that because there was a vested interest. The treatment, I could readily see that having someone come back to get something from you in a world where money is how everything is transacted is how to get more money. If you cure something, they don't come back. And so I knew that capitalism inherently had a motivation to stifle technological progress. And because of that, they are engaging in violence. Who the fuck are they to be doing this or determining this for anybody? Equal under the law and all. Yes, baby.
Can you get me a snack from the
One moment. I'm actually very pleased at how this is coming out, despite having little interruptions, and I do keep some of those interruptions in so that you guys can see and hear who that is, depending on who you are. And we're still about Young Life, so this whole video is about the Young Life, and I will probably cap it at around junior high school. But yeah, from what I've covered so far, we had a lot. I can't really explain to you how many hospital visits. It was hundreds, and some of them were for months. Most of them were for weeks. Some of them were just for a few days. Sometimes when I was younger, I would see an ambulance go by, and I would know that they were going to my house. They were going to get my brother, and they were going to take him to the hospital. I knew this. And I wasn't always right, but too often I was. And it was soul crushing to worry about someone that much. And oftentimes, especially when he ended up in the ICU one time, I gave him the name Needle Man, which developed my distaste for needles. But he always, throughout his whole life, took needles in with stride, with courage, and with a sense of mild annoyance, like and I was just in awe of his courage. And we were still living a very intuitive and very informative life, and we learned so much, especially once I started school and started obtaining methods of analysis like the scientific method, and really digging into daytime television, Sally Jesse Raphael, Donahue, Oprah, and really watching these various narratives that were driven, these conversations that were had,